All right, we have a very special guest with us today, hailing from the great state of Massachusetts. She is a barrier-breaking skater, the first woman signed to the Adidas Skate Team, resulting in an awesome feature film, Nora, presented by Adidas Skateboarding. She won the Vans Park Series World Championships in China in 2017, the same year she turned pro with Adidas and Welcome Skateboards. And she's recently put down roots in San Diego, California, where she's not only lifted the local talent pool in the skate community, but according to the unimpeachable inside source of Chris Cote, has been smashing it in the water as well. She recently graced the cover of the October issue of Thrasher Magazine and is a sought-after ambassador for brands like Welcome Skateboards, Stance, June's Shine, CCS, YETI, and many others. We have the incredible Nora Vasconcellos on the podcast. Nora, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. That was crazy.
Yeah, I got through without screwing up.
You kind of nailed it. Yeah, that was really great. I think I'm going to have you record my voicemail now, and you can just let every time someone leaves a voicemail, that's what they have to hear.
Do people leave voicemails for you a lot?
Yeah, but I have one of those voice message machines that's really messed up. It's like that of like a 13-year-old. I answer in the voicemail, right. And so people, right. Yeah, I did it years ago, and then people get kind of caught by it all the time, and they're pretty bummed. So I got to get that switched up. But maybe I'll hire you to do a little. That'd be kind of cool.
I guess so. It sounds like it's kind of an adventure if you call you right now, where you're like, oh, cool, I got to have an experience. That's pretty good. Well, I know we're going to get into it. I know you're a busy person, and just getting to follow you on social media, you seem like you are all over the map, a lot of projects, a lot of travel. But first things first, where are you talking to us from this morning? Are you in San Diego?
I am. I'm in Encinitas, California.
All right. And that's your new home. Is that right?
That's home. Yeah. Just bought a house here. So
congratulations.
Thank you. I'll be here for the long haul, you know. Pretty stoked.
I like it. And we are in October. I'm up in Ventura. I'm not sure how the seasons have been down there as far as surfing goes. We've had a rough few seasons, but it's finally turned around for us a little bit. Have you been able to get in the water lately, or?
It's been flat here. I don't know what's going on. We've had this weird south wind the last couple days. And I've been dying to get in the water. And then I was fighting a cold. I've been sick for like 5 days, so it's kind of been in between. Like I have barely stepped outside, and then I'm constantly like going on Surfline trying to see if there's anything moving, but it doesn't look too good. It's just weird. Well, I feel like we got kind of jinxed out of a summer too.
Oh man, we've been losing our minds up here, because usually fall, winter's our time, and last fall, nothing. Winter, 1 or 2 days. Spring bad, summer bad, and everyone's just started losing their minds. So I'm not even saying it's finally turned around, because I think we're too shell shocked from the last 12 months. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I just went to Santa Cruz, and we didn't get any waves. Like flat, like super flat.
Now, did you go to Santa Cruz? Was that on the back of your Sequoias trip too, or was it different trips?
No, it was separate. This was just a couple weeks ago. It was end of September. We went for Santa Cruz Skateboards had their 50th anniversary, and I ride for a bunch of brands under NHS. So it was kind of like a fun excuse to go and see some friends. They had Dinosaur Jr. play on the beach, like on the boardwalk in Santa Cruz. And we brought a bunch of boards, we're just ready to get in the water anywhere. And on the way up, we checked everything. We couldn't find a ripple. It was wild.
Well, it's got to turn around eventually. You know, when you were at home, obviously we're going to talk about all the trips you end up taking, but when you were at home for any amount of time and you're not sick, what does a typical morning look like for you? Are you up early? Are you skating? Are you training? Are you surfing if there are waves? Or are you just, what's your day look like normally when you're not sick?
If I'm up early, I'm surfing. I like to sleep. So probably, I'm probably trying to go surf. My boyfriend lived in Oceanside, South O, and so we would kind of surf anywhere between South Oceanside and basically Seaside, kind of that zone. But I would say we were having a lot of fun sessions towards the later half of the summer at Cardiff Reef. which is, I think, surprising just based on like the crowds. And we ride pretty small boards. We're not like on logs or anything. So we've been having fun there. But I would say like a normal day, it's all over the place. It's so weird. Like when I'm home and I have time to be home, I'm like kind of a homebody. I'm definitely trying to surf a lot. And then sometimes different projects will come up. So I'm out skating or driving up to LA to skate, or, you know, something like that's happening. But yeah, I would say recently just been kind of hunkering down and trying to just get set up for the new house and stuff.
Makes sense. You got to conserve your energy because, as we said, you are a busy person. You've released another signature shoe with Adidas this year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think for our listeners, I'm sure a lot of them are pretty familiar with skating, but most of them are more familiar with surfing. But for those of them that are not, can you kind of walk us through just, I'd imagine how essential it is to be able to release your own shoe as a professional skater, and just walk us through that process.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's kind of one of the biggest things that you could do. I think one thing that maybe surfers wouldn't understand is in skateboarding, your biggest kind of sponsor is your shoe sponsor. That's kind of who you travel with a lot, who you do a lot of video projects with. And product wise, getting a pro shoe it's just crazy because there's this crossover, you know, especially if you're on Converse or Nike or Adidas or even Vans. Those shoes are so popular in the world, right? So right. You have a shoe that is obviously for skateboarding, but you start to see it out in the world. And so I think just the ability to kind of like infiltrate that market and see your shoe and your product in like normal day-to-day, not skate surf industry is pretty cool. But yeah, I got my first shoe last fall in September, I think was when we released it, or October. And it's wild because it's something you work on for like 18 months before it comes out. You know, it's like there's so much going into the rollout of a shoe and of like any product like that. So it's pretty wild. It's been so insane just because I was a little kid that wore like Adidas shell toes and soccer shoes and Sambas. And now I'm like having my own silhouette it still doesn't feel real. I've been like waiting for it to hit me, but it really, I don't think it has.
So interesting too. Like, I'm glad you brought up the kind of behind the scenes business component of this, which for skaters, like your primary sponsor is often your shoe sponsor.
Totally.
In the surfing world, it's probably shifted. It probably at one point was like the big kind of clothing companies, and then it's probably energy drinks. Obviously board sponsors are ever present, but they don't have kind of the same financial investment that a lot of the other brands do. And shoe sponsors are big in the surfing world too, but it's probably just a bigger leap for most people to understand that, because it's like, well, like, surfers don't wear shoes when they surf, you know, skaters, this is like an essential tool. And so even outside the skating community, I'm sure most people look at it and go like, that not only looks good, but that's like a proven product with someone who needs that product to work.
Totally. And you go through shoes a lot. You go through skateboards and shoes the most. So it's cool because even the way Adidas does it, what they like to do is they like to take a silhouette or a shoe from a heritage part of their brand. So with Tyshawn, they took a basketball shoe to make his pro shoe. With Dennis Buznitz, they took a soccer shoe to make his shoe. You know, they take the heritage from these older shoes that they've made. With my shoe, we looked at tennis. We looked at like court shoes, because the skateboard shoe needs to be flat, needs to have a good amount of grip and board feel. And so, we just started looking at like Steffi Graf's shoes, and we just started looking at just a whole variety of Rod Lavers. We looked at all these pro tennis shoes from like dating back to the 70s, and I wanted that like very like vintage feel, something that was kind of timeless. But yeah, it's wild. It's wild to think like that we take so much from stuff that already existed. You know, skating has done that.
It makes sense. And you said you blow through a lot of shoes. So like, give us an estimate, like in a given month, like how many of your own pairs of shoes are you blowing through just day-to-day skating?
I'm on like the spectrum that is probably going through the least amount of shoes, and I'm not super picky. So I would say my shoes are going to last me, if I'm skating, normally 2 weeks. If I'm skating on a trip, maybe 5 days. Like if I'm skating on a trip and like filming every day, 5 days. But I have friends, like I have other pro skater friends who literally are, by the third day of a shoe, they can't really handle it. And they'll, they pass it forward. They don't throw out new shoes, but it's all preference,
Interesting.
Yeah,
and you talked about trips. Now I think it was your trip to Spain that yielded you your cover shot with Thrasher's October 2023 issue. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I've actually had I've had a couple Euro trips. I've done Paris a few times in the last year filming for this part, and that was outside Barcelona. Yep. Interesting.
And is this your first cover with Thrasher?
Yeah. Crazy.
It's a big deal, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I almost crashed my car because I found out I was on the 405 going to LA for work, and it was really, the timing was funny because we had just done a guest editor edition of Monster Children. And that was something I've been working on kind of all year. And I got a dual cover. So there's the same mag with two different covers that alternate. There's like a lifestyle cover and a skate photo. And that was my first cover ever. Like I had never had a cover before that. And then the week later, the Thrasher cover came out. And so I was getting text messages and they were like, congrats on your cover. And I was like, oh, it's probably about Monster Children. And then Xander, who took the photo, he's like, thank you, congrats. And I'm like, no, because I knew what photo he was talking. Like, I was like, there's no way. And then Thrasher will like surprise you, like Burnett, who kind of runs the gig over there. He takes a lot of the cover photos, but he'll also like surprise you in different ways, or it'll just go straight to the gram like that. And it just went straight to Instagram. And my phone blew up, and I like fully like cried. Like I've cried, I think 3 times because of skateboarding. And I was like, holy crap, this is heavy.
You're someone who can probably speak to this much better than I can, because you exist in kind of both the skate and surf world, but we don't really have the same thing anymore in surfing. 20 years ago, it was probably there, a dozen, magazines around the world, and getting a cover on any of those was really important. And, there's a few left and they do good work, but there's not kind of the monolithic importance of a Thrasher magazine in surfing. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's fair. It's so different, and it's so crazy because there are so many people that I've looked up to who I would consider my favorite skaters who haven't gotten their Thrasher cover. Their time hasn't come yet, and hopefully it does. I hope that there's so many people that I'm like, they need their cover. But it is this thing, and it holds so much value. And I don't know, I think for me, especially, I've never really had covers. So that also meant a lot. And there are so many reasons. It's kind of the culmination of it felt so special. But yeah, I feel like it's kind of a little bit of a lost art, especially for surfers, where a lot of the mags are gone.
Right. And you mentioned, you mentioned how you and your boyfriend were surprised that you were having, fun sessions out at Cardiff Reef, mostly because of the crowd factor. And something that comes up on this podcast every now and then when we talk to, people in surfing, people outside of surfing, but sometimes you'll have surfers that are like, oh yeah, I'll do yoga, or I'll go climbing, or I'll skate or something, and we always comment on how different those communities feel. Whereas, we'll say, oh, go to the climbing gym and everyone is so nice. Like everyone's everyone's helping each other and, being supportive. And then, we'll go to the surfing and the lineup can be the opposite sometimes. Totally. And I think a lot of that has to do with like finite resources. You know, the waves are real finite. They're either there or they're gone, and the good ones are there and then they're gone, and not everyone can get them. Whereas, you know, the climbing wall or the yoga mat, or, you know, probably like a place where you would skate, you know, either a park or a rail or a pool or whatever, it's always there. And so I think people, it just feels like the temperature's turned down in those communities. Have you felt like that's fair from your experience?
Yeah, 100%. It's very funny trying to explain it to people. My brother is kind of new to surfing. He lives down here now, and I've been trying to get him to surf for 15 years, and he just would never really get into it. And now he's got him and his buddies, and my boyfriend and I like bitch about this all the time. He's got like a 15 group text message that they used to play pickleball. And they're like, oh, everybody, we're going to play pickleball. We're going to Cottonwood, blah, blah, blah. And now they're all kind of over pickleball, but now it's like surfing. They use this 15 person text for surfing. And I'm like, dude, we can't go surfing with 50. Like, we can't, like, we don't pull up to a spot with like 2 or 3 or 4 people, really. You don't really pull up to a spot with like 4 people, never mind 10 or 15. And I've tried to explain this to him, and he doesn't like really get it. But yeah, I do think it's a combination of finite resources, of just the fact of like how accessible it is. I mean, you've got like the breakdown of like localism. You have the breakdown of people's like schedules. Like, oh, I only have 45 minutes to surf today because of this reason and that reason. You're in the water with a dozen other people who are probably out there in the same, like, for the same reason, that they only have this time frame. You've got the influx, I would say, like the COVID influx of people who are learning or intermediate. And it's just so funny and weird, I think, because we've all been beginners, but then I'm also the first one on a session, like surfing and looking at my partner, and I'm like, I almost just got killed by like like this board, like people surfing leashless who've never surfed in their lives. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's this really tough balance of people knowing their ability, surfing within their ability, being safe, being, you know. So I just think like the equation, there's so many different factors to it. And then it's super funny though, because I do think I remember pulling up to skate different things when I first moved to California, and like pull up to the Combi Bowl. And there's like a pecking order. Like, you don't drop in on Grasso, you know, you don't drop in on Hosoi. And those guys are right there, and they're giving you turns too. It's like a working system. But I do think that because wind can change and the waves don't always come when you want them to, and because it's like nature, it is this different thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that scarcity, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? Mm-hmm. Where, you know, when you get a great wave, it feels like extra, extra special. You're like, oh man, that was wonderful. But then on the other side, like we've talked about, it's probably created, you know, an added element of aggression and tribalism and localism and all sorts of things. And it's so funny. Like, this does come up on the podcast more often than I would have imagined, but it's like, surfers in the surfing community love to fancy themselves as like progressive nonconformists. But then when you get down to it, so much of it's like insecurity and conservatism, like, you know, and all these things where I'm like, it's so weird. And I mean, I think there's a lot of good things happening, like, but I think to your point, like that balance of like, hey, we should be more inclusive, but like, it can't be without functioning systems. Otherwise, you're going to get beginners that are hurting people. You're going to get kind of chaos in the lineup,
or hurting themselves too.
Exactly. Yeah.
There is this really crazy thing, and I see it at skate parks too. Right. Like, I'm starting to see it a lot more with like kids. Like, you've got people who let their kids roll around on scooters without a helmet, and you've got like the gnarliest people flying around on skateboards.
Right.
And that 180-pound dude who does this for a living and is going like 30 miles an hour is not going to lose against your 4.5-year-old.
Right.
It's just like
it's basic physics. Yeah.
Basic physics, but also like you're not going to bring your kid to a track while people are running on a track and let them. And it's this like hard place too with that. I mean, you see, because people are like, it's a public space and our kids want to play on their scooters and little skateboards here. And you're like, fair. But like, there's also like a perimeter around the park with a sidewalk. That's a better place for your kid to be scootering and stuff.
Right.
I've seen like some gnarly slams where little kids there's a viral video going around where like somebody runs into a kid and his mom and they just get so smoked and you're just like, dude, the self-awareness or the lack of self-awareness maybe is so heavy, and that freaks me out just as much as like ability, I think. Like there used to be this thing where you'd walk into a skate park and I remember you'd get like yelled at for standing in the wrong place. Or you stand on the deck and you kind of observe, you see where everyone's skating, you see the flow of what's going on, especially if you're skating like big transition. And now I feel like you've got people just on their phones filming each other. Like it's a very different kind of flow or lack of flow. And I it's so wild to, I guess, compare it to being in the water too. Because you see it on all sides.
Yeah, and I think the phone thing is a good point. Like, I don't think humans have like adapted to like how quickly technology has changed the way we all live that well.
So
like,
bad
and
for us.
Totally, and even to your point, like it's such a weird instinct where people grab the phone. I think about this when I get stuck in traffic all the time, where I'm like, traffic's got to be so much worse than it used to be in some places, because it's not just that everyone's slowing down or there's an accident. Everyone slows down, and then everyone's like grabs their phone and is like. And so that slows things down even more. And it's like, not that driving was ever a meditation, but surely like, being at a skate park was like a singularly focusing exercise.
How about going to a concert? Dude, I almost lost it on these people who were at a concert we were at, and it was like general admission standing. And I'm like 5'5". My boyfriend's 6 foot, and my best friend Sheezy's like 5'1". She's tiny. And the people in front of us are very tall. And the entire concert, they are like filming the concert like this.
Right.
So not only are we like, we can't really see just because of like, we're seeing a screen and we're not even far from the stage. And I'm just like, dude, I just had to watch a whole concert essentially through someone holding up their phone. And you're like, there has to be a better way. There has to be. And
no one's ever rewatching that. That's the thing. It's like you were there to experience it. Like you're not going home and being like, I'm going to watch it now.
It's like an amazing show. Right. And that, like, I remember just being so frustrated and kind of feeling I had taken some mushrooms too. So I was probably feeling like a little extra, like in the feels of it. Like I was like,
sure.
God damn it. Like, this is so epic and awesome. And like live music is so fantastic. And it's like people take out their phones, you film 10 seconds of it. I get it. That's fine. But this is like an entire concert being like, are you live streaming? But it's just weird. I do think that like there's this balance of like technology and this balance of also consideration for each other. Like there's so many of us all trying to enjoy things and do things. And the problem is it takes one or two inconsiderate people. And this could be in a lineup. This could be at a skate park. This could be in a classroom at a concert. Just takes one or two people and it throws off a group of 20. And
it's a great point.
The biggest problem, I think, is like, damn it.
Well, and I just feel like humans, I think this is maybe more pronounced in America, but there's not a ton of humility that goes into our lives. I think everyone's like, I have a short window on Earth. I'm going to either act as if everything is perfect the whole way. But progress isn't a straight line. Like there are cul-de-sacs and people can be like, I have this tech and we were doing this behavior where we were filming all the concerts. That's not great. Like, let's all actively not do that. We can still use the phone for these things, but
culture, like influencer culture, totally fucks that whole thing up because now you have people getting reactions.
It's an economy unto itself. That's the problem. Right?
How is that dude that like got shot for like harassing some guy. He's like there was a dude doing a prank on some guy at a mall. And the guy was like, leave me alone, leave me alone. He gets shot in the stomach by this guy. And he's like, oh, I'm still going to go around pranking people. And you're like, people like, don't fuck with people. Leave people alone. Like, you don't know what people are going through, or it's just common decency. And now we're like, you've got younger people or even older people doing pranks or creating content willy-nilly, just being like, oh, it's just so unfortunate. It makes me want to go live on a farm.
Well, like Chad Muska, right? That's his deal. He's on a farm. Maybe he's ahead of the curve again.
Yeah, it's just killing it.
You know, the one thing that I noticed I got to watch it when it came out a few years ago, but I got to rewatch it because we get to talk. In watching the film Nora that Adidas Skateboarding put out, was a comment by Andrew Reynolds. So I guess this is 2017. So this is like 6 or 7 years ago when it was probably filmed. But he made this point and he goes, you know, she is one of my favorite skaters of all time, like boy or girl kind of thing. And I'm like, I get that. And certainly in the surfing world, we've seen like a diversification, more inclusion, a lot of like amazing performances from women surfers, and a real leveling out in a lot of ways, which I think is healthy. Was that in the skating community? Did you experience something similar at that time? And the reason I ask is because I'm sure there was a stigma, like a gender stigma in skating at one point, but just because of, again, everything is there all the time. Like you're able to hit these spots all the time.
Totally.
It feels like the culture would be more naturally inclusive from the jump, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
I don't think any space is inclusive when it kind of is run and the industry of it is run like by men. Like it doesn't even matter if these are like the best guys, you know, if it's the best people, you need to have diversity behind it. And so I say that in the respect of like, even in the day of Alyssa Steamer, right? Alyssa being like the pinnacle of being as good as the guys, filming video parts, being in the van with everybody, being sponsored, having a board, all of that stuff. It's like, it still isn't like enough for someone to thrive like that. And I think even now we're seeing so much happening, but a lot of it too is not gonna change as heavily until like we see more shops run by women, more women working in the companies. I think that's again when we're gonna continue to see like massive, I think, growth. But yeah, I think ultimately, I've seen it change a lot, and it's crazy because I like really looked up to Steph and like Carissa as a kid, because I was like, I want to do what they're doing in skateboarding, because they were closer to my age and I could kind of see them just being like, their ability was so unignorable that I was like, I want my ability on a skateboard to be so unignorable and so like, she's not good for a girl kind of vibe.
Right.
Yeah. Like stuff like that.
That makes sense. You know, and I think it is interesting. It's good to hear that you feel like it's changed a lot, even in your own community in the last, it's not a long time, like 6 or 7 years.
It's been like 5 years.
Yeah, and I feel like it's probably been a little bit slower coming on in the surfing world too, but I see it on both sides. Like even the crop of guys on tour have just a different energy to them, you know, in the sense of I'm gonna crib an example I heard from this other podcast the other day, but they were talking about Perry Farrell, the lead singer of Jane's Addiction back in the day, and they said in a lot of ways he transformed what masculinity was. It was like a softer masculinity and more of a fluidity. And he goes, and the person's like, look, like Perry Farrell's far from perfect in a lot of ways, but it created this permission space for this next generation of male rockers to not have to kind of do what their predecessors did and still be considered kind of apex. And I think you see that across sports too now, like in other sports, like the next generation of even kind of male athletes, it does feel like they're not as, I don't want to say that. It just feels like they're a little more secure in who they are, even if that's not prototypically kind of like type A. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's also like, the whole like male athlete, it's all just like such an ego-driven thing, and I think so much has been excused because of that, because it's like their performance and their what they put on for people, like whatever their persona is of utmost importance, and everything kind of falls behind that. And so I do think that now, just with accountability and just there's so many things, and also just people realizing okay, here's a good example. I like to bring this one up because this happens all the time. Like I have people I've known forever, guys, who will come up to me and they'll just be like, hey, I just want to thank you for everything you're doing. Like I have a daughter now.
Oh, now.
And I'm just okay. I'm like, it took you having a daughter for me to be seen as like another, like basically like a person who's trying to pursue this or be a skateboarder and I understand the good intention behind it, but that's kind of how embedded all of it really kind of is. It's this very fascinating world of like my ability and who I am is valid, like despite my gender and all of this stuff,
Well, it's a great example, right? Because in that scenario, the person's still making it about them. It's because my daughter, right?
Totally.
And it's I do think, as you pointed out, like it's certainly progress, and it's well intentioned, I think, in a way. And I mean, speaking as on behalf of the male species in a way, sometimes we're not great with words. It's like, I don't know what else to say. Like, here's why, the lizard brain's like,
and I like totally,
one of you, right?
I understand that. I totally get it. Most people aren't good with words, I think. But I do think it also does a great job of exposing kind of the deep-seated issue of gender with it, because like this person is not trying to be, even when people in the past have said, you're my favorite girl skater, like you're still you're complimenting me, and I appreciate that. And there is always this like backhandedness to saying it in that sense.
Right. They're qualifying the
Yeah.
compliment.
And it's but like I said, it's always appreciated, but it does also show kind of the way that we how we hold people and how we hold people's like space based on their gender and stuff. It's just very interesting.
You said before, I thought it was really interesting. You said so much of male athletic performance is ego driven. What do you think is driving female athletic performance as a comparison?
I think it's way more intrinsic. And I think that sounds crazy in a sense, but I think like I feel like especially watching WSL right now, right? Watching the women and watching, I think, the level of progress we're seeing right now, and like everything from like the age gap that is like Katie is presenting, like Katie and Molly, but then also having Steph and Carissa, like just having this super wide spectrum of age not being a factor. Like these women are all like at their best level, kind of. Yeah. And seeing the progression but there's something about the women. There's a grace. There's a grace that Carissa carries. There's a grace Caroline carries. There's a grace Steph and Katie. They all carry this grace about them. And I don't even know if it's femininity, but they carry this grace with them. And I just think it's, as a surfer, I love watching it. And I think with the men, there is just so much more ego. And it's just so interesting. Right. And I don't know if it's like the way that competition is. But I think the women are just so much more interesting and fun on tour right now, because there's this like really raw, beautiful, like, I don't know, like it reminds me of like Tom Carroll, or watching Curran, or watching all these older like guys surf back in the day, watching like Kelly in his early days, watching Andy. I mean, Andy had an ego, but it's just this, there was just this difference, you know? And I love seeing Griffin and his crew, because they bring this really like funny energy. Like it's always him and his brother and his friends. They bring that real like youth vibe. But I think overall I love what the women have brought to the table.
That's interesting. Well, I think Griffin, like we were saying before, he's part of that next generation of like, they're a little more secure
and he talks pretty heavily about letting go of his ego. He talks pretty heavily
being vulnerable,
about that.
Big time.
Yeah. About that. And I just think as a surfer, I think surfing is like pretty sacred in a lot of ways. And I don't know if it's a combination of it being a solo sport. I don't like calling it that, but like being a solo practice, or being something that is something you do with nature. But it's so funny to see it become this like very elitist thing. Right.
That's a good point. I think great. Well, I was going to say, I think grace is such a good word to use. And it reminds me, I when I was little, this came out, but it didn't came out. I watched it when I was little, but Greg McGillivray's 5 Summer Stories, like iconic surf film from, I think it's 77. At one point, I think it's Margot Oberg who's talking about men's and women's surfing, and she uses that. She says, I think the women are just more stylish and graceful, and that grace thing always stuck with me. And I think it's a really apt description of a real point of difference.
It's just so nice, and it's so enjoyable to watch, and like I said, it just really makes me want to surf. That makes me want to surf, is seeing that fluidity.
I like it. Well, we're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to wind the clock back and talk about how you got into all this. We'll be right back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is the lineup here with Nora Vasconcellos. I'm Dave Prodan. Awesome conversation in the first segment. Really appreciate that. I think it's worth going back to the beginning for you. Let's talk about where you came from. Little town, my understanding, Pembroke, Massachusetts. What was family life like? Mom, dad, what did they do for a living? Like, how did you get into skating at a young age?
Yeah, pretty random. So my parents are from New Bedford, which is like really, really classic old whaling town, southeastern Mass. It's actually where Moby Dick took place. So for you Moby Dick nerds out there, that's where my family's from. And they moved up the coast to Pembroke, and my dad is a freelance illustrator, and my mom did coaching and a bunch of other work. But yeah, it was pretty epic childhood. I have a younger brother, Davis, who's 3.5 years younger. And we just kind of grew up in the woods, kind of old farmhouse on a cranberry bog. We just kind of did everything. We like BMX'd, we like built tree houses, we ice skated all winter. Super active. My mom was a sailor, and her family have always sailed. So we were really definitely involved in like the ocean to some degree.
So is that like the New Bedford whaling lineage on your mom's side?
Yeah, it's kind of a combo. Like my dad's lineage goes all the way back to Portugal, and his family were whalers out there, and they just kind of recently found that out. But my mom's family is like of Irish French descent from Nova Scotia, and her grandfather was a sailor, her father. Just like that whole thing, like she was one of 9 kids, and they would just like put 9 kids on a sailboat, and that's what they would do on the weekends. Is they just sail around. So pretty awesome. So definitely like around the ocean a lot, but I didn't like see surfing and skateboarding until I was probably 5 or 6. And I saw it on Nickelodeon at my cousin's house watching Rocket Power, and it's literally just a cartoon, and I was obsessed. I was obsessed with it. And like asking my parents for a skateboard for Christmas, all that stuff. And we like lived out in like, there were no sidewalks, gravel driveway, like didn't really have anywhere to skateboard. But I would say by like 11 or 12, I had started to get really into surfing. And I used to do like ESA contests, but like I would just show up to like Nantasket Beach in Hull, and there'd be like no other girls to surf against, and like 3 other kids. So the surfing was funny. It was definitely just like me dragging my parents around as they learned about it. But I rode for this shop, Levitate, which is still a surf shop out on the East Coast. And Bob Pollard, who sadly passed away in 2007, he started it, and he was just like a local kind of hippie, kind of really like vibed guy, like just was such a surfer. And I would just go and hang out. I'd be like, hey, I'm just like at the shop, like smelling the wetsuits. Like I just wanted to be around it. And that was my first sponsor. And I just remember kind of like starting to go to surf movie nights that they would do, and meeting the community, and was doing surf contests for a bit. And then it just got too expensive. Like going down to, I would go to Montauk, go to Ditch Plains to do events. And then that's kind of when skateboarding took over, because I could go to this one skate park like once a week and skateboard in my neighbor's driveway. And that was, surfing just wasn't as accessible.
Makes sense. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about skateboarding, right? Is it's a pretty low barrier to entry. Like obviously you gotta have a board, but a bit of concrete or find some out. And do you think, because I my understanding too is you were kind of at the upper echelon of what they call, I believe, like transition skaters, which I think demands like a bit of like speed, power, and flow, right? In the sense of it's like funny. A surfing sense. Like, do you think the surfing? Do you think that background kind of, how do you gravitate towards that type of skating?
I think it totally does. I think a combination of that, and then the skate park I started going to, Skater's Edge in Taunton, Mass, was this old mill building, and it had all these ramps and everything. Had like primarily ramps and stuff, but the zone in the middle that had like rails and stuff that I still don't really skate to this day was like Brandon Westgate, Nick Dompierre, Anthony Shetler, like the best pros that New England had at the time were like always ripping. And I would go skate the bowl with the older guys, and they were so nice. And I do think it was a combination of like coming from surfing and understanding that vibe a little bit more, and being a little bit freaked out to be like trying to session this flat bar with those guys.
Right. That's interesting. Is it similar, do you think, like in surfing there's, big wave surfers and air surfers and contest surfers and free surfers. Do you think that maps pretty closely to just how distinct the disciplines are in skating between, pool skaters and vert skaters and street skaters and stuff? Yeah,
I think so. I think there's definitely guys who like have surprised me, where I think a lot of people especially who were pro or amateur the 90s to early 2000s, have vert ability that you'd never know. Like there was a vert ramp around, so they were skating vert.
Right.
But I think there's just so much more focus on like the all-terrain skater. Like all the best skaters are kind of ATVs. And I think the same is with surfing. I think a lot of those guys, even if they're not, I don't know, I think they're all like pretty capable.
Right.
I just think it's hard to like put yourself in big waves, or it's hard to put yourself in such a variety of waves all the time and be like focusing. Like at least with skateboarding, you can go to certain skate parks and have a vert ramp and a box and these ledges and this rail. You can have everything literally in one place, where surfing, it's like you gotta fly here for this wave, then you got to go here for this wave, and then go to Waco and do this air. And then it's a lot more. It's just harder to get such a variety.
It does seem like that it's a pendulum, though. Like it feels like that, like specialist to generalist pendulum. Like, you could say 20, 25 years ago, like most of the types of surfing was pretty specialized. Like you were like a pipe surfer, or you were like a small wave surfer or whatever. And then I'd say over the last 20 years, the men and women on tour are so almost, as you said, they can do everything, right? And
yeah,
then,
I think it's accessibility. I think it's that, and also being able to watch everyone else ripping at a certain level. It's like, I think being able to visualize, like that's the only way I can do anything, is I just would watch skateboarding.
Right.
Like I would literally like force feed myself skateboarding because I couldn't skate or surf that much.
So, I mean, it sounds like growing up, your parents were hugely supportive, and you could kind of go in a lot of different directions, you know, surfing, skating. I'm sure there were other sports and other interests. And I'm curious, how early on did you realize like skating for me is what I want to do? It's what I want to invest my time in.
I think like forever, like there is some like very deep seated, like I have a video of me getting my first skateboard. And I think from that moment you can see like the spark, but I would say it was graduating high school. It was 2011. And I like wasn't going to go to college. I wasn't going to go to college. And I was like, I'm not going to try anything as hard as I try skateboarding. And so I actually worked for a year out of college for this like big printing company. I was like very dark times, and then moved to California in 2012. And I was just kind of initially, I was like, I'm going to work in the industry, but at least I'm going to live here and be surrounded by it and be able to skate every day. And that was the beginning, I would say, of that realization of, oh yeah, this is definitely what I'm going to do.
Right. And did you move to San Diego, where you are now? Is that where you ended up when you came to California?
No. So when I moved to California, I didn't have anywhere to live initially. So I went to Woodward. I went to Tehachapi, like the middle of nowhere, and worked at Woodward for like 8 weeks. And then my mom came to California because she was like supposed to, she worked for Apple. And she worked at one of the stores out here for like a short amount of time. She was supposed to only work here for 6 months to help me get like established, because I didn't have a car. I didn't have anything. We were totally broke. So it's just my mom and I living in this like little 1 bedroom that we were renting from this family for like a couple of years. And yeah, it was really kind of crazy. But that was like Orange County. We were living like Rancho Santa Margarita.
I know it well. But I mean, yeah, I do. It didn't exist when I actually grew up. Then it became a thing. But I mean, that's a huge emotional investment and support on your mom's side, right? Like to be totally. Hey, yeah, I'm going to come out here and we're going to do this. And was the plan like, I'm going to be in and around the industry. I'm going to be investing my time in this thing I love. And walk us through how you went from that to going, well, I mean, not to going, to being in a place where, okay, now I'm it's not going to work in the industry. I'm going to be supported by the industry as a professional skater.
It's such a wild ride. So this is 2012, 2013. I would say right before 2013, I was skating at Etnies Skate Park in Lake Forest, or it was either Etnies or the Combi. And this guy came up to me and he's like, hey, do you speak English? And I was like, yeah, why? He's like, oh, where are you from? I'm like, Boston? He's like, we thought you were from Brazil. Like, you're so good at skating, blah, blah, blah. And it's this guy, Jason Salea, who started Welcome Skateboards. And he's like, do you want a job? Like, do you want to work for Welcome? And I'm like, who is this guy? And literally, like, within, I want to say 2 weeks, I was, like, working at his house out of his garage for Welcome. And so this is 2012 going into 2013. And I had, like, a job at PacSun for, like, 2 weeks. Because I literally moved to California, worked at Woodward, got a job at PacSun, worked there. Because my mom worked at that mall, so we would share a car.
Which at the shops at Mission Viejo, is that one? There we go.
Exactly. And one day I worked the Black Friday shift as like my second shift. So I worked midnight until 9 a.m. Right. My mom came with the car, dropped the car off. She had a shift at 10 a.m. I got the car, drove home, got a flat tire, and just sat on like the side of like Marguerite Parkway, just like sobbing. Like, why is this like my life? Like living in a bedroom with my mother, like sharing a bed. She used to keep these crystals in the bed. And I was like, Mom, we can't have crystals in the bed. And like, it's just, this is some shit, right? Like imagine being 20, 21 years old and you're like sharing a bed with your mom because you're so broke. And so.
And her crystals.
And her crystals. And I'm like, Mom, there's barely room for two of us in this bed. The crystals gotta go. So anyway, worked at Welcome. And I worked at Welcome for 4.5 years up until 2016 when I got on Adidas. So 2016 is, I'm still working at Welcome.
What are you doing when you say you're working at Welcome? Like what kind of stuff they have you do?
Just did orders, and then I learned QuickBooks and I did QuickBooks, started learning logistics, did some sales stuff, but then eventually like did international logistics and fulfillment stuff, and then collections. Like I still know all those shops that didn't pay us. I know all you people that never paid your bills. So
if someone's like, hey, Nora, can you come do a signing? You're like, hold on, I've got a kill list. And no, like.
It was actually super rad though, because I still like know so many shops throughout the country just from working at Welcome. And now like I go and do a demo, like we do a thing with Adidas and I'm like, what's up, Trent at Cowtown? What's up? So it's really cool. And then I just kind of learned how the industry worked. I feel like I got to see the ins and outs of what makes somebody a pro skater. And I do think that there's something really special about working before like getting that opportunity. I think so many kids, especially in surfing, go straight from being a child to stardom. And you miss out on so much about learning how like you're a piece of the puzzle, I just think it really helps you maintain longevity within like the industry. And like I learned so much stuff from working at Welcome I wouldn't have learned from even going to college or
now, did you feel like your skating during that time was improving as well?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I went from like skating once or twice a week because that was like the reality. Like I wasn't a street skater. I wasn't going into Boston. I was like a teenage girl. Like I'm not taking a train into Boston to street skate. I would skate a lot of vert, skate parks. And then when I moved to California, it was just like, I can skate anytime I want that I'm not working.
Right.
And so I was skating a ton, definitely felt like my ability, like I was getting better. And then 2017 was, I think, a year into being signed with Adidas. I had traveled. We filmed a video around that time for Welcome called Fetish. So that was like first video part. Won the world title Vans Park Series thing, and then I went pro with Welcome. So I was like a whirlwind.
I'm curious because the tension in surfing, I think it's a healthy tension between competitive surfing and free surfing. It's good, totally. And I think it pushes either side. I'm curious, do you feel it's the same in skating between sort of being a competitive skater or the equivalent of a free surfer in skating, just a free skater, street skater maybe? And then for you in particular, do you feel like winning that World Championships in China competitively gave you a lot more space and runway to do what you wanted outside of competition?
Yeah, I think so. I think skating's funny because surfing has like the tour, you have WSL, ASP, you have what was this thing for like 60 something years. Yeah. And it's this very established program or whatever you'd want to call it. And with skating, we have all these events, but they've changed over time. And there's all these different disciplines that get, you know, it's kind of morphed into so many different things. So I do think that skating in the contest world is not really seen as like, it's not as respected maybe as surf contests in the grand scheme.
Right.
But
it's interesting. Oh, go on, finish, please.
No, yeah, but I think things are changing. I think Street League, like what's happening in Street League and what the World Skate's doing, like you can't deny the ability and what's happening in these events. But in order to stay relevant and to be kind of getting covers on Thrasher and to be getting the deals you want to get, you still have to be part of the core group, which is filming videos and going out and shooting photos. And I think it's still like, so I would say like if it was free surfing, it's as if free surfing was still like the reigning thing that you had to be doing, where
right. It's really interesting because you mentioned kind of the obsession with youth that the surfing world has sometimes, like in contrast to maybe in the skating world, where I'm sure they're obsessed with young, really talented kind of wunderkinds, but there's probably a lot more stories like yours where it's like someone developed and they had a real job and they kind of created these bits of their identity as a human being, and then were a little more fully formed when they became professional skaters. But I remember this for years where you'd see this influx of young talent, often in North America, that were like, I'm not doing contests anymore. I want to do what Dane Reynolds does. It's like, well, Dane Reynolds is fourth in the world on tour right now, you know? Or the Bruce Irons ones before that. It's like, well, Bruce made the tour. Like, and I think a big part of that is in surfing is I think those guys are amazing free surfers, and I think that's probably what they're most well known for. But they also answered the question of could they do it in the live arena as well, just by making the tour. I'm wondering, it feels like maybe there's a little bit of a stigma in skating still because of what you said, where there's not kind of a multi-decade established competitive arena, right? Totally. It's a little more, you could create an identity. There's very successful skaters that never do live competitions, I'd imagine. They just focus on the other things.
Yeah, I think it's way more about who you are as a skater and like maybe what you represent or how gnarly you are, or if you're still putting out video parts. And I think it's hard too, because I've seen kind of how surfing, like you have this dynamic, I think, with surfers and skaters, like the surfers dynamic with having things filmed. Like it's so much more accessible for a skater to have a buddy and us film at a skate park than it is to go travel across the world, set up in another country, film a handful of sessions, enough to get even a minute of footage. And then like the reality of being a free surfer and putting your clips out there is so much work compared to just being a skater doing the same thing, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. Yeah. And it goes back to the kind of just the scarcity component of like, it's so much energy to put together, you know, a 7-minute surfing clip. And that's not to say like a 7 minutes
for music. And it's like seeing kind of even like the vlog world, seeing how people are doing that. It's crazy. Like I have so much respect for what Nate Florence is doing. Yeah. I don't know how he does it. Like you're surfing the gnarliest stuff. You're getting so much footage. You're all around the world. You're editing it, and you're still like making it into this like tasteful, enjoyable thing where like I'm not cringing at like a vlog type of thing.
No, it seems exhausting and like borderline impossible in a way.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then you know what Dane did with Marine Layer and now Chapter 11. I mean, that stuff is. That I think I would compare a lot more to how skate videos are made, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, which I love. And then seeing what Katie's doing with Toasted, it's kind of like she's definitely paying homage to that era of Dane's surfing. And with her, it's just crazy because she just put out that Surfer of the Year entry her first year on tour after winning like 2 stops. And that's pretty exciting to see because not only does she have her foot in the door of like becoming a world champ and being on tour, but so far she's the only girl to put an edit in for this year, right? For Stab.
Yeah. So, no, that's totally right.
But it's pretty damn cool.
It is. And I think kind of what you're saying before, I think her being able to express herself that way and surf that way helps her in the contest arena, and probably vice versa. There's probably like a little bit of...
I think it keeps her sane.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Hey, she is a kid. You know, we talked a little bit about this just on kind of the progressive nonconformist attributes that people like to assign to counterculture activities, whether it's surfing or skating or punk rock music or whatever. And longtime writer at Trans World Skateboarding Magazine, Mackenzie Eisenhower, once wrote, skateboarding is an anti-hero culture. So once the culture deems you the hero, it's just waiting to rebel against you. And I thought that was pretty profound, and I can see that a lot in the surfing world. I'm curious if you, A, agree with that statement, and B, if you've ever experienced that in the skating world.
Yeah, I think so. I think everyone's kind of trying to take the piss a lot of the time. Like, I think a lot of skating is being able to not take yourself too seriously. Not be too elitist, not be too much of anything. I think there's this real raw and playfulness to skateboarding. And I think that's why I still do it, is I'm just like trying to preserve my youth. And I know when I'm trying a trick and getting lost in that, I feel like a kid in a lot of ways. And I also think that skate culture, it's like, you can never like fully encapsulate it, because it has all these little like moments, and it has all these little personalities. But I do think, like, at the end of the day, even if you're the best on paper, or like if you can do the gnarliest tricks, there is this like energy of being able to like laugh and take the piss or something.
Right. I mean, I think you said that really beautifully in Nora too. I'm going to paraphrase, but it was something to the effect of like, skateboarding is an excuse to keep playing as an adult, And I thought that really lined up, it seems, with like a lot of people's perceptions of you too, where it seems like the common comment is Nora is an incredible skateboarder, and she also makes me want to skate. Like, and that seems like that's not true of everybody, whether they're surfers or skaters. It's like that person might be like an amazing surfer. They don't necessarily seem happy or make me want to surf. And I'm sure it's similar in skateboarding. Is that something that well, I guess I'll ask first. A, do you agree with that characterization of you? And then B, is that something that you intentionally went out to do, or you think it's just something that comes out just through who you are?
I think it's really nice. I think it's a really rad compliment, because I would have to say that like my favorite skateboarders have always been the people that I like would want to skate with or inspire me to skate because of how much fun they're having or their personality. And then, I would also like, I guess I would definitely, I think, agree with it. I think as a kid, I always suffered the most when I felt excluded or weird or quirky, or when I just like didn't feel like I had a place, or when I felt like people were judging me. And I think skateboarding was such a relief, because I felt like that was a place where I wasn't judged. And I also was getting this, like, I was not a particularly confident kid. So I also think I like found a confidence I had never had before through skateboarding. And it helped me learn how to kind of solve problems. And all these, it made me more resilient, and all these things. I'm like, if I can give that as a tool to someone else, if I can inspire a kid to skate or someone to skateboard, and they find any of what I have found through skating, then I've done my job. Or that makes me happy. That's fulfilling to me, And I think it's hard, because I do think as like a skater, we have our own intrinsic battles of like, I want to be the best I can be. I want to like do this. I want to land that trick. I want to show off to these people and get that cover and all this stuff. And that's really awesome too. But I think for me personally, and maybe it's because my background is very like normal and not like, here are the steps and this is, you did all the steps to become this pro and that was always going to happen. I think it's because it's a little bit more average person just following their dreams. I think that also feeds into it and is just what I want to kind of push, because I think it's better for everybody than over elitism or whatever.
Oh my God, yeah. And I actually think that that's such a beautiful way to put it, right? Because while it's not perfect, and we've talked about it, like, you know, the community is really passionate about skateboarding, and it's secure enough in that passion to where they're like, yeah, anyone should be able to do this. You don't have to look like a certain person. You don't have to be a certain person. You don't have to come from this much money. And that not only makes the community, again, not perfect, but more inviting to someone like yourself, where you're like, I didn't have a lot of confidence. I didn't look like everyone else, but they accepted me because we had this shared passion. And then you in turn have returned your own talent and your own contributions back to that community. And you are probably one of many at this point that makes the skateboarding community so potent and impactful, just because of that security around, hey, we have a common passion and we're comfortable letting everyone come in who has that passion too, which is, you don't see that everywhere. I just think that's really cool.
Yeah. And I also just think finding, like, showing kids that they can go outside and enjoy something without, needing a lot of money. I think is really huge. Like, I suffered so greatly as a kid because I couldn't surf all the time, and I was like super depressed because I was just watching people surf on YouTube or whatever, and like living in this like little community. Like, I was so removed from it, and it's all I wanted to do. And like, thankfully, skateboarding helped me to find that passion and live it out in a different way. And like, now I get to kind of fulfill little Nora's dreams by like living in Encinitas and being like, hey, you get to go do the surfing you wanted to do those first 20 years that you didn't get to do, you know? So I think that's like really, really important, just because I think so many kids don't have resources. And it's like, you can have the littlest thing that you can like skate the littlest slab of cement or someone's driveway, you know, and if it gets you outside and off your phone and gives you confidence and makes you friends, it's pretty awesome.
I love it. We're going to take one more break, and we will be right back. All right, we're back. This is The Lineup. I'm Dave Prodan, here with Nora Vasconcellos. Wonderful conversation so far. We've walked through what you've been up to lately. We've walked through how you got to this point in your life. We've tackled the big subjects. I feel really good about it. I'm curious, what's next for you? What have you got going on through the rest of the year? What does 2024 look like? How does Nora Vasconcellos map out the next 18 months?
Oh man, I don't it depends. Sometimes stuff gets mapped out pretty far, but right now, kind of sitting on a project, like a Thrasher Adidas part that'll come out pretty soon. And that's exciting just because it's really like one of those things where I'll have a little bit of relief, because with skateboarding, putting out clips is kind of like the top priority. And it's been a little bit for me. In last September, I broke my ankle filming for it. And it was super, like, of course, it was like my first trip for my shoe, and I've never broken anything in my life. And I was like, honestly, let's just break the seal now. This is good. So kind of dealing with a year of like healing and starting to skate again, finishing that part. And yeah, just going into the fall and winter, I just want that footage to be out and kind of basically start something else. Just kind of trying to consistently be filming and feeling good. And then I would love to go on a surf trip. I've never gone on like a proper one. And I don't know if that looks like a boat trip. I don't know if it looks like going down to Mex, but I'm just like ready to kind of nerd out on a surf trip.
I am curious because I've heard it the other way with surfers on tour who love skateboarding, but who will sign sponsorship deals where their sponsors go, you are not allowed to skate because you are not allowed to get hurt. We pay you to surf. How do your sponsors feel about you surfing? I'd imagine they'd be pretty stoked.
I think they're stoked. Like, I think they know that
additive,
it's like,
right?
Yeah, it's I mean, a lot of them I think would view it as like cross training. Like so many more skaters are now getting into like mobility work and strength training and all that stuff. And I just love it for like mental sanity reasons. Like it keeps me,
right.
It's just something that I enjoy. Like if I'm struggling to film a trick or if I'm just not feeling motivated, I can still go and surf and get kind of that same feeling. So,
right.
And it was great. It was kind of the first, it really helped me when I broke my ankle. I broke my fibula. So it was the outer bone and I had surgery and did all that. And it was really helpful, like to get my confidence back just because being in the water and being like flipping around, and it's my back foot. So it's kind of just like my driving foot and being able to move it around in the water and surf. I feel like it helped me get back to skating way faster and way more confidently.
That makes a ton of sense. I'm curious because, I mean, having been at the WSL ASP, it's like 18 years now, when people would get hurt, 20 years ago on tour, how do I put it? There wasn't a ton of care or thought that went into the rehabilitating all the time. But I'm fascinated now because it's like, even when you hear about like NFL stars or whoever, there's all this sports science and body science and all these treatments where you're looking at someone who's like, that person's not going to be able to walk again. And it's like, nope, they're back on the football field in 6 weeks. How did they do that?
Like,
what kind of stuff were you kind of doing the science fiction treatment on your ankle? Did you have access to that kind of stuff?
I did, but I kind of, what happened was I was in London when I broke it, and the surgeon is a guy who's done a lot of work in skateboarding and surfing. And his assistant was also, I think, in Portugal, and my team manager, who's a skateboarder as well, had hit up them, and they're like, we have a skater who's going to probably need surgery. He's looking at the x-rays like the same night we're in the hospital. I'm in London. He's looking at x-rays. He's like, oh yeah, put her through. Like Dr. Thomas will operate on Tuesday. So it was like pretty seamless. I had a great doctor, and he's like an avid surfer, knows about skater ankles, and it's just like, oh, this is nothing. This is like easy. And he just, I think starting there with a doctor who isn't looking at you like you're crazy or like this is going to this is going to create problems. Like it's the total opposite situation. And I think that's changed so much now because you have doctors who understand that there are pro skaters where back in the day it was like, you're probably never going to be able to do this and this again. So interesting. Yeah, just even that. And like, even the metal he put in my ankle, he's like, it fits your ankle perfectly. You're not going to have issues with it over time. The rest was probably good and needed. And then I just did a lot of like massage. Like I would go and get a massage whenever I felt like I needed it. Like a lot of like self pampering a little bit. And then when I started being mobile, when I was out of the boot, I would go to these girls in Solana Beach at Send Fitness, and they're awesome. They basically are strength training and mobility work. And it was just all about like getting my leg to bend and my ankle to bend and open it up and make sure it was like ready to do what it needed to do. But I wasn't like doing a ton of like laser treatments or anything. I've done that stuff before. Like red light is really good. But this was definitely more of like a slower, I wasn't rushing to get back out there, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me, I was reading an article a few years ago about LeBron James, and they're like, he spends $3 million of his own personal money just on body maintenance, in addition to, whatever the Lakers staff is doing, whatever Nike's doing. It's $3 million of his personal money on, sleep scientists and chefs and dietitians and massage. And I'm like, This explains a lot, because I think I bought like a Swiss ball last year and haven't even inflated it, but this explains.
Yeah, like I bought like jump
difference,
ropes I haven't used, stuff like that.
Right,
like,
yeah, so.
It's hard. I think, yeah, I think it's so interesting. I think people get pretty obsessive about it, but
yes,
for me, it was much more of a balancing the mental and physical part of it, and then not coming back too hot and making sure that I was feeling strong and was actually strong, so that I could. I think my biggest fear was starting to skate too early, and then mentally not being in a place, like the right place. I didn't want to push it.
Makes sense.
It was good, and it's not like I'm not competing, so I didn't have like a strict schedule to abide by, and yeah, it's literally been a year and a week since surgery, so feeling pretty good for that time frame.
Good for you. You know, one of the things we notice with, you know, talking to athletes at different, how do I put it, points in their career, you know, a lot of times when you're young and you're first getting your sponsors, you're kind of, I'm going to take whoever will support me. I will do whatever they say. And sometimes that's fine, and sometimes that's not. And then, you know, if someone's successful, the longer they're around, it feels like the more agency they have in terms of, I'm going to be a little bit more discretionary in terms of who I want to work with and what projects we're going to work on. And looking at your current crop of supporters, it really feels like they're a great fit for you. And it feels like you've intentionally gone, yep, I want to work with these people and we want to work on these projects. Is that a fair assessment of where you're at?
Yeah. I've been really I would say I've been really lucky, because it hasn't been, I would say with my sponsors, it hasn't been like difficult's not the right word. It's just felt like who I jive with has come to me, and it's been pretty seamless. And it's also like, I don't do deals with people that I don't like actually support the product or what they're trying to push out there, because it's like, I just have no interest in lying. And like for a paycheck, you know, like I don't know, I've just been really fortunate. So, and it's been cool, because I feel like I've gotten to learn a lot about business and how things work, just based off of seeing things grow and being part of things that are growing.
Yeah. Well, that seems like it goes hand in hand with what you talked about before, like that experience of working, you know, behind the camera, so to speak, at Welcome Skateboards, and learning about it, and probably coming into, you know, your own career as a professional skater and going like, yeah, no, I know what to do and what not to do. And, you know, YETI, they're one of the supporters of the show. They've been a great partner of ours, and they seem like they're very specific about who they want to work with. And it has to be something, as you pointed out, where it's like, hey, we're not asking someone to shill something they don't believe in. They actually... Like, it has to make sense for them. They have to use the product. And that seems like it's totally in line with yourself. And talk to us a little bit just about that relationship and what kind of, you know, YETI products you use week in and week out.
Yeah, I think I was always like super impressed with YETI, just with their like production work. I feel like they do such a great job of telling stories, and any brand could do whatever they want, especially when you're somebody like YETI who makes a product that works. It's like, you could have any way of campaigning. You know, you could have a bunch of influencers throwing the things around, and it could be pretty like cheesy. And I've just liked that they are way more focused on like storytelling and the earth, and people who have been doing things for a lot of time, and they're just in no rush, I guess, to like infiltrate markets. And that's kind of what happened with YETI skateboarding was bags. This guy, Mike, who's just super epic, I was talking to him every once in a while. And then, we just started talking about different projects and like my love for surfing. And he lives up your way. So just talking about like taking his boat to the Channel Islands, and just kind of like nerding out on what we all nerd out on, which is like surfing and skateboarding and spots, and how kind of YETI would fit perfectly with like the skate world, you know, like I think all of us have been on a session where we're like dying of thirst. So like my thing is I always have this YETI Rambler. It's like a jug. It's like a gallon. I have a half-gallon one and a gallon one, but they're these like jugs of water because I'm really bad at drinking water. So just like shit like that, like having a good water bottle around versus going and buying a pack of 20 plastic ones.
It's fair. I mean, Steph Gilmore said something similar a few months ago. She's like, I love the Yonder because I can see how much water I drink, and I'm really bad at drinking water too. And I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, all right. And then I got one, and I'm like, it's so legit because you're like, oh, I'm doing well today. I'm at like 50% of where I need to be drinking my water.
And I think we're all guilty of probably not drinking enough water, but water and then having a straw. I need like my little straws because I'm too lazy of a human being, I guess, to like uncap things. Like I drink 90% more water if there's like a straw to drink it out of.
Just easy access. I'm into it. I like it. Well, we did put we did put a few questions or feelers for questions, out to the Instagram community at the Lineup Pod, and we got a ton of questions back for you, but we have whittled them down to 3.
I hope you picked the craziest ones.
We picked some pretty crazy ones. First question is from @KittyKendall, who asks, what is the first and most difficult trick you learned to do?
Ooh. The first trick I remember doing was an axle stall. And an axle stall is essentially when you're on a ramp and you drop in and you go up to the opposite side on the coping and you put both trucks down on the coping, and then you drop back in. And I forget how I learned it, but I remember when I learned it, it was one of those tricks that opened up a lot of different doors, because that opened up the door for being able to like grind and do different things like transition skating. And definitely took me a minute, but then once I did it, it was like a barrier of fear had been lifted, because now I was like standing on the coping, going back in, and it created definitely more of a flow with skating. So I would say that, and then learning a kick flip. It probably took me like 8 months to like attempt and then land one. But that was cool. That was a huge, good feeling.
Good answer. Second question is from @manbackwards, so Nam maybe, who asks, how do you get over the fear of breaking or re-breaking bones after these big charges? I guess that's a fresh question given what we talked about.
That's heavy. That's loaded. I'm definitely still dealing with it. I have, I would say just skating and trying to enjoy myself and doing the basics, doing things that are like kind of low impact, but building like my muscle memory back. And then also I literally like am trying to talk to a like sports psychologist for this kind of stuff, because I'm interested in this dynamic, because I'm still dealing with it. Like I've had a big issue this summer, I feel like, with coming back to filming and going street skating. I have this really weird thing where I get to like landing the trick. I get to where my feet and my board are within 3 inches of where I'm trying to land, and I bail. And that's how I got hurt. So it's literally just like getting out of a habitual thing. And I don't even know the answer. I'm currently trying to figure it out. But I think it just goes to show, it's like it's been a year since I got hurt, and it's going to be something I'm dealing with for who knows how long. But I think at the end of the day, I'm not really scared of getting hurt. I'm just trying to figure out why my brain is like blacking out in those moments, you know? Like,
interesting.
I've been able to.
And are you saying? Oh, go on. Sorry. No, I was just gonna say, when you said that's how you got hurt, was it because you were bailing, or was actually the impact? You're right. Yeah.
It was so weird how I got hurt, because I literally like envisioned what I did before I did it, and that should have been like, don't do it, because you just saw yourself breaking your ankle and then you did it.
Right.
But I was just bailing. I basically like wasn't committing to an ollie down into this bank. And then the one I kind of did almost commit to, I sat on, kind of trying to bail out of it.
Right.
So it's definitely some sort of, it's all mental, but I'll keep you guys updated on that because it's a process still.
Great answer. Third question from the Instagram community is from @Tony Teish, who asks, what advice do you have for girl groms today?
Oh, just have fun. Have so much fun. I wish I was a girl grom and had like 8 other girl grom friends that I could just go to the skate park with. I think just have fun and enjoy your youth and listen to your parents and brush your teeth.
Yeah, unless it's about crystals in the bed.
Unless your parents have crystals in the bed, then say, Mom, I need the crystal out of the bed. That's fair.
Respectfully. Mom, in the corner. Yeah, I gotcha. Well, thanks to everyone who wrote in at the lineup pod. We are now down to our final segment of the podcast. It's time for the lightning round. So these are 10 questions for you to answer as quickly as you can.
Okay.
If you could only have one board setup for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
My current board, which is I think it's 5'5'1", Alex Lopez shaped custom twin fin.
Beautiful.
I think it's perfect. Except I would maybe do glass-ons.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Burrito or pizza?
Pizza.
Last book you read?
Crying in H Mart.
We're going to adjust this question slightly. Best surf or skate film ever?
This is a lightning thing? Bag of Suck. Enjoy Bag of Suck.
Okay, good. One wave you never have to go back to?
That I don't have to go back to? Like, don't go back to a wave?
Like, don't want to, don't have to, whatever.
Shit. I don't know. I'm going to go back anyway.
That's a good answer. If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life, and I'll caveat that with you can dreamcast it. It can be perfect conditions.
It's like
just
perfect
your friends,
conditions
whatever.
every time?
Yep, whatever you want.
All right. Beetle Rock, Massachusetts.
Okay. Best person to share a lineup with?
Leah Dawson.
She's wonderful. Worst person to share a lineup with?
No comment.
Fair enough. Last one. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by...
Going to the Muna show tonight at the Greek Theater.
I love it. Nora Vasconcellos, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. This was a wonderful conversation. Appreciate your insights. And yeah, I'm inspired by what you do week in and week out. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Dave.